All right, so how old are you now, Gandhi?
85.
85. 80, you promise
Don't
not to break my camera.
don't tell the women they think I'm 45. There are hermit souls which live withdrawn in a place of self-content. There are souls like stars which dwell apart in the fellowless ferment. They're pioneer souls which blaze a trail where highways never ran. So let me live in the house by the side of the road and be a friend to man. Let me live in the house by the side of the road where the race of men go by. Men who are good, men who are bad, wise, foolish, so am I. So let's see, why should I hurl the scenic band, but just live in my house by the side of the road and be a friend to man? That's one of my favorite programs. Poems, rather, not programs. Okay. Well, my mother's name was Hattie Kirk, and my daddy's name was William Thaddeus Newton, and my dad was from McCall, South Carolina, and my mother was from Gibson. My daddy's mother was one of six women. She had five sisters and one brother. And one of the brothers had moved to High Point sometime late in the 1800s and had gone in business with a man by the name of Jimmy Millis. And they had started out a Millis hosiery mill. And that's how we got up here. When the Great Depression hit, there was no jobs down in McCall, South Carolina, and Gibson, North Carolina, where they were from, and so they had to do something. So, being they had started the Adam Millis hosiery mill and had several other hosiery mills like the Triangle. His brother had come up here before him and was running the Triangle, and he offered him a job to come up here, and so my mother went to work for the Triangle, and my daddy went to work for the Triangle, and Daddy was a fixer, and they were working there, and we moved. I was born in Trinity, the first house past the school, and we lived there a while, and then we moved to High Point when they had the jobs up there, and so when let's see when uh, Daddy they somehow or another they moved from High Point down to Archdale, and I got my tonsils got bad, and so Dr. Leaf they went up to him and took my tonsils out, and they did not know, which they found out later, that I had rheumatic fever at the same time, and when they operated on me early in the morning, they couldn't get the blood stopped, and it was 9 o'clock at night when they finally got the blood bleeding stopped, and so they put me up flat on my back for, I think it was 3 months, and wouldn't let me raise my head up. So I was in the third grade, and I missed that year in school, and so I went down to Archdale and started the school down there, and it was just a few months after I got it straightened out that doctor used to come by and visit, and he asked my mother had I had rheumatic fever, and she said, well, they thought maybe I had after they took my tonsils out because they couldn't get the bleeding stopped. And he said, well, it has because he has a heart murmur. And so they wouldn't let me play any sports of any kind in school. And so in the when I got about the ninth grade, I went out for basketball. I wasn't supposed to play any sports, and the coach saw how skinny I was. I looked like I got pictures of it, but they didn't even give me a number, but because I wasn't supposed to play, but they let me get on the team. And the coach was named Red Coble. Mahatma Gandhi was starving himself to death in India, and he died starving, and he started calling me Gandhi because I was so little and skinny. And that name has just stuck with me. Nobody else knows anything else but that. unless I sign a check or something. When I got 13 years old, I started mowing yards, and then I got a paper route, and I was doing both, and I was trimming. I was mowing the doctor's yard that had worked on me when I like to bled to death, and he had a big hedge around halfway around his house that was 4 foot wide, and you had to cut it with a hand clipper. And I done all that work for him, and one day I had bought me a Cushman motor scooter to carry my papers on when I got 16, and I rode it up to his house, of course, and he said, "I see you got a ride now." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "How would you like to work on my dairy farm down in Hillsville, North Carolina, on the same road almost that I lived on?" And he said, "It's about 8 or 9 miles down there." And he said, "I'll pay you $300 a month, and I'll pay all your taxes." Well, the minimum wage at that time was 30 cents an hour. And so I took the job, and he told me to get one person to go with me. And I got this boy, Donnie Gilmore, and we went down, pile rocks up a whole year down there in the field. And come fall of the year, he said, "You want to work for me this winter?" And I said, "Well, I have to." I told my mother I graduated from high school, and she said, "Oh, just go down there in the morning and feed the calves in the calf barn, and come back, and then go to school. Come back in the evening and feed them, and then go home, and I'll pay you the same thing all the way through school." And he paid me $300 a month for 3 years. And I bought me a new Indian motorcycle. This beauty, the biggest thing made, weighed 650 pounds, and I weighed less than 100, and I had to kickstart it. But anyhow, it was a pretty bike, and I worked on that job till right before I graduated from high school. Then I quit the job because I knew I wasn't going to do that all my life. And then when I after graduating from school, I took several different jobs. I got a job at, let's see, Boys? No, I won't go there. Well, I just go there. One of my final jobs was Boyle's Auto Parts, and I worked there for several years. And a buddy had come by one day and said, "How would you like to go work with me?" And said, "I'm a manager down here on Carolina Rio Graphic," and said, "I'll give you a good job." And so I went with him, and I worked there for several years. And one of the boys I was running around with, David Raleigh, and his mother and daddy owned half the High Point Enterprise, which was really a going thing at that time. And they had another son named Joe, and he was at Harvard. And so we run around together, and at this job at Carolina Reef Graphic, I had worked my way up from running a press to I was doing part of the selling for the company. And they said, "We want our boy up at this graduate from Harvard, we want him to get into business." And said, "How about you like to start a business with him, doing what you're doing?" And I said, "Well, he said, we'll furnish all the money, and you won't have anything involved, and we'll give you a third of the company." And I said, "Well, how can I turn that down?" So I did. And so I worked there a long time, and I realized that we wasn't making any money. Of course, it didn't seem to be important to them. They owned the building we were working out of. And so I started looking around a little bit for something else to do. And I told one, I was on this bowling team named Weaver Morgan. And they were huge in fabric for furniture, for sofas and chairs for furniture. And one of my buddies named Joe Marion he was younger than me, had already took a job with him, was doing real well. He was traveling Hickory. And so I knew, two of the owners of the companies, the owner of the company's two sons would own the bowling team part of the time. And so I told Joe, I said, "If y'all ever need another salesman, how about putting my name in the pot?" So he told me one day, he said, "We need a name, and we need another salesman, your name's in the pot." And said, "You got a good chance." And one of the guys I went to church with was kind of a manager of the whole company, and his boy was in my RA troop, of course, and so I had some input in that company, and I went over there, and Joe had already told them. Joe knew me. We'd been together some. He told me that I didn't drink, and I wouldn't do something running around like all this other salesmen were doing, and so they showed me all around the building, and went into the big office, and there was Cleo Venable, the guy that boys in my RA troop, and Ronnie and Sandy was there. They were the owner's son, and they told me, said, you know, we know you, and we think you'd make us a good salesman. But it said, Joe tells us we got some problems. And I said, well, what's that? And he said, Joe tells us you don't drink, and that you wouldn't fix your customers up with drinks. And I said, that's right. He said, well, we got that figured out for you. He said, you can just act like you're drinking, and you can pour it in your shoe. And I said, and he said, as far as fixing them up, women, your customers up with women when they come into town, we'll handle that for you. And I just give them a little testimony, and I told because of this is a Jewish organization. They're all Jews, Orthodox Jews. And they said, and I said, well, I won't do that. And I said, I knew the boy behind me would get it. He lives right down the street here and now. But I said, I knew when I left there that I told him I wouldn't do it because of my relationship with Jesus Christ, and it was a spiritual thing with me. And when I went out of there, I knew I didn't have the job. But the next day, I was having my car worked on at the Ford place, and I went in to pay for my parts, and I looked in the showroom, and there was Jack Pickett, the boy I was talking about. There he was in there getting him a company car the company was paying for. And he saw me in there, and he walked in there, and he said, well, I reckon you know I got the job and you didn't. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, I sold out to the devil. And he had been to Catawba, and he had a Sunday school class and all this stuff. But anyhow, I didn't get the job, and it was really kind of upsetting to me. About a week or two later, bowling at night, Sandy and Ron, these two Jewish boys, was there. And when we started out, I always went by and got me something to drink in the cafe. And when I did, Ronnie and Sandy were sitting over there in the booth, and I noticed it awful odd. Both of them were sitting on the same side, and they motioned for me to come over there. And I went over there, and they said, Gandhi, you know, we're Orthodox Jews. And said, how about sitting down over here and telling us about Jesus? So I witnessed to them, and you know, I just told them about Jesus and how to be saved, and left it. When I left there, I was all upset. I just turned down. I was making $6,000 a year, and I could have been making $60,000, just like that. And I just kind of bothered me a little bit. And it wasn't for long, about, I don't know, a few months, I started dating Mary, and I was doing most of the work there. The partner, we had a Cessna airplane, and he had a Porsche, and all kind of fancy stuff. And I knew we wasn't making any money. We had 7 employees, and I was running the press and doing the shipping in the evenings. Everybody else left and carrying and packaging it and carrying it to the post office. And I thought things, you know, were going good. And they didn't know I was looking for another job. And I went in one morning, and about 10 o'clock, the partner, he always set up in the office, you know, he didn't do no work. He just, the brains man of this big organization. And he started back there towards me, and I started towards him, and he said, he motioned for me to come up there, and he said, you're fired. Give me the keys to the company car. And that's all he said. And that's all I said. Didn't say why, nothing. I just gave him the keys to the company car and got in my car and started home. And I was upset. I'd never been fired before. And I happened to go down this one way. I didn't usually go that way, Eden Terrace. And as I was going down Eden Terrace, there was a boy I knew. He wasn't a run around with, boy I knew fairly well. And he was out mowing his yard at 10 o'clock in the morning and had a for sale sign in his yard. And I stopped. I don't know why I stopped, but I just stopped. And he cut his lawnmower off and he said, "What you doing out of work this time of morning?" And I said, "I quit my job." Well, I did after I got fired. But anyhow, he said, "You want another job?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I've been transferred to Roanoke," and said, "We need another salesman." And he said, "My phone's still hooked up. We didn't have all these fancy phones then." He said, "My phone's still hooked up. Let me go call Tom Martin." He called him. Tom said, "Yeah, send him on over here." And this was, the odd thing about this was, our place was on Bethel Drive. And this place was on Bethel Drive. And so I go over there. I told him, I said, "I'm not dressed to go to interview for a job like this." And he said, "Well, you don't know Tom Martin. He don't care what you were." So I went on over there and I went in and sat down and talked to him. And I just told him up front. I said, "Before I apply for this job, I want to tell you, I'm a Christian. I believe in living right. I don't run around on my wife. I don't drink liquor and furnish customers with drinks. And if that's not the kind of salesman you want, you don't want me." He said, "Well, I don't know about this religious stuff. So I ain't got much faith in Christian people." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well," he said, "let me give you an illustration." He said, "Just about a week or two ago, I went to church finally. I don't go much," he said. But he said, sitting up there in the choir singing was the guy I saw the night before out with another woman besides his wife. And he said, "I just ain't got much faith." And he said, "Well, I'll take you, said, first thing to do, have you got a 2-year degree in accredited college?" I said, "Well, Tom, I've been to Piedmont Bible College 4 years, night school. I don't know whether they're accredited or not. I didn't go for accreditation. I just went to study the Bible." He said, "Well, let me check on it." So he called me. I don't know where. I just told me to come back at a certain time or how, but I went back and he said, "You're a lucky man." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Piedmont Bible College is the only accredited Bible college in the state of North Carolina. And you have a 2-year degree." And so he said, he gave me the job. And it was a great job. First year, I had the most new accounts in the United States of America. I had 57. And the job was really going good. And I've had something happen. We come out with a new product. And it was a tool that wrapped wire, paper-covered wire to springs on the seat of furniture. Kept the feet from falling over. And everybody else was using a hand tool, would put a clip in it and squeeze it. And I was selling those things like crazy. But every time I was selling one, I'd go get this paper-covered wire from another company named Flexilators. And I'd sell their product along with mine. And so things were going good. And so this Flexilator Corporation, I was selling for them too with no money. I told them, I said, "How about giving me your frame business back in the back?" They crated back there to ship their stuff. I said, "I want you to buy my air tools because I'm doing your stuff for you." And he said, "Well, this guy, Stuart Stone," said, he was manager. He said, "Well, put your stuff back there. And if James Withers, the other guy, likes them, he's the one that's doing this." He said, "We'll put them in." So as I started, I put it in. This was a week before the 4th. And when I come back to try to close the deal, on the way out that day, when I put them in, I met this guy that was their salesman. They hadn't had him hired long. And he talked about how I asked him where he's going on vacation. He said, "Well, he's going to work in his garden and over the weekend." And when I come back in to try to sell my tools, this other guy said, when I went back to see him to try to close the deal, he said, I reckon you know my position." And I didn't know what he was talking about myself. He said, "Well, our salesman died last Saturday, a week ago." That was the morning after I talked to him out there that evening. He died in the garden. And he said, I hope you don't mind, but I put your name in the pot for his job. And this is in Carthage, Missouri, where the headquarters and the people are. And I told him, I said, Stuart, I don't need another job. I got a good job. And I said, you know, he said, well, I hope you don't mind going and interviewing anyhow, get me off the spot. I didn't know, but I think 12 or 13 people interviewed for that job. I thought I was the only one, really, for years, till I talked to some other guys that interviewed for it. But anyhow, I went and I met with Bob McMorran up in the hotel. And I told him up front the same thing I told everybody. And he said, well, would you be interested in this job, taking this job? He said, you sound like the person I want. I know I've talked to your people, and I know that you can do it. And I said, well, I don't know. This guy's hired me, Tom Martin. I think the world of him. And he's been transferred down to Atlanta. And so he said, okay, said, so I called my present boss man down in Atlanta, and he said, don't take that job yet. Said, I'm coming up next Monday. Coming up to your house, and I'm going to stay with you down to the lake like I had done before. And we're not going to talk about it. We're going to boat and have a good time. And on Monday, we're going to go somewhere and eat, and we're going to talk about it. And that's what we did. We went had a good time, and we went up in Statesville way, and sit down and talk. And he said, Gandhi, I've called that company and talked to them, and I know their situation. And he said, I know where you can go with this company because I'm the man that goes. But it was a Fortune 500 company, and it was Signo Steel. And he said, I know where you can go to this company because you said you wouldn't move. That's what they transferred people everywhere. And I said, that's right. And he said, if I was you, I'd take that job. Now he was giving away the top salesman in the United States for new account at that time. And so we went back to the office in High Point, and this other manager was out, and he picked up the telephone and he called the other company that I was applying the job for. And he got a hold of Bob McMorran, and he said, Bob, I want you to know that I'm giving you our best salesman. And you wouldn't see many people that would do something like that. But over the few years after, I know what the Lord put me in that job for, because when he was in Atlanta, before this sickness and all, anyhow, we went down, we took our boat, went down, and he had a houseboat and rode with him and all. And I went down and witnessed to him, talked to him about Christ. And when I heard he had cancer and of the lungs, he smoked. And I witnessed to him, and I told him how to be saved, and left and come back home. And I waited a few weeks, and I called him again, and I asked him. And in the meantime, I had Jack Hudson, who had the largest church in Atlanta, Georgia. He had, in the whole state, he was holding a revival in Winston. And I went and bought a Schofield King James Bible, and I went over there to that revival meeting early, and I asked to see Jack Hudson, and they let me in. I told him I had this Bible I wanted him to take down to Tom Martin if he would. And he said, well, I can't do it. He said, I'd be honest with you, I'm just tied up, I can't do it. But he said, I got 7 salesmen working under me, and I'll be sure that I'll get it. So he did, and I called Tom later, and he said, I want you to know everything's all right. And I said, well, I'm coming down in about a week or so, but he died on Friday. And so I think the Lord put me in that position. And so I took the other job. And I'll never forget, first sales meeting I went to out in Carthage, Missouri. I was a new salesman. It was in February. And I sat down at a table with 2 of the top salesmen in the company. One of them was Hickory and one of them was Texas. And they was drinking, and I didn't drink. And they were drinking, and they got talking about my little old territory up there in High Point. And I told them, I said, I tell you what, boys, I got tired of listening to them. I said, if I don't outsell both of y'all this year, I'm gonna send you a $100 bill in the mail. Now this is in 1960 something, and they just died laughing. They said, we bet you. I said, no, this ain't no bet. This is a gift. And I never sent them any money. And I took that job at $290,000 a year is what sales it had. And they promised I wouldn't take it, but they promised me I'd make 5%. That they'd pay me $16,000 the first year if I didn't make that much, 5%. Well, I was the first salesman to ever sell $1 million worth for them in a year, and I never sent them any money. And when they sold out, I had $1,600,000 in sales, and that's the kind of sales deal with. I've had, after they sold, I had sold with 2 other companies. One was Liggett and Platt, and one was Hickory Springs. One was 2 years, and one was 3 years, and I retired. That's my sales deal. Did I do good?
That's good.
I didn't tell the Flexilator story. How I led the president and chairman of the board to Christ when he was 75 years old in Carthage, Missouri.
Well, I'll write that on the back.
Lord, that's the reason the Lord put me in these places. Really?
Oh, if I can get up.
Hey,
I need
you know
some.
what everybody give for sale for Christmas? Liquor. You know what I give all mine? King James Schofield Bibles. I did.
That's why I put you there.
It was the talk of the JCs and everybody else. They thought one of the guys, the president, he asked him, said, "What do you think of this? What do you think of this guy giving away Bibles and stuff?"
Now see, he can't do that. He can't.
No, it was JCs, called JCs in High Point. They don't exist anymore, but it was a businessman's thing. It was a businessman's thing. Besides, they had the Christmas parade every year in High Point and all this stuff. And guy talked me into taking the job. I was Emerywood Baptist, and I was helping the youth director, and he asked me to make a talk in JC's, and I did. And when I did, they asked me to take over religious activities for the JC's. And I did till they closed down. I stopped doing it.
Right.
But just something, something different. He's one of the ones that got one of the Bibles.
And I had to wrap them all.
She had to sign them all.
No,
write 'em.
I wrapped them.
Oh, did you wrap
I
them
didn't
all?
sign them.
He was a Bible wrapper. I saw a guy he met 6 months ago. I hadn't seen that guy in 20-some years, and I recognized him. He said, "Come over here." He said, "I still got that Bible you gave me." But anyhow, I got luck.
Okay.
I was going
You've
to tell you
got-
about being
You've got
my community and how the boys I run around with, how rough they were, and all that stuff. And I was a rough customer, run around with a gang of boys, and we all, and I was the biggest cusser in the bunch, and used God's name in vain all the time. That was one of my biggest words, and I thought it made you bigger, and that was all the way through high school. But I didn't do it around my house, and I didn't do it at school. It was just around the boys. And in fall of that year, after I graduated, I went down to church. We was standing around over the fire, baby. It was a cold evening, and me and another boy, and we saw this thing in this other boy's back window, revival at Fairview Methodist Church, and we just decided we'd go down there, and and to that revival meeting. I never been. I went to church all my mother made us go to church, but no revival meetings, nothing like that. Just little old things. And when I went down there, I rode up there on my big old Indian motorcycle. I reckon they thought Hell's Angels had landed. And and we went in and sat down on the back row, and the preacher preached, and I got under conviction, but I didn't go down to the altar, and I worked third shift. I'm just telling you the story. And I worked third shift and had to go in at 12 o'clock. And after the revival meeting, and when I started to go to work, took the other boy back at midnight, I said to him, you know, that's something I need. And if I could just go one night without saying a cuss word, I believe I'd go back and get saved tomorrow night, whatever that is. And I couldn't believe it. I worked all night long, and all the boys up there with buddies, you know, packing these fools on, and I didn't say a cuss word all night long, and hadn't said one since. And I went down the next night, went down, got saved, and I think I got saved the night before. That's it. And that's when I, you know, changed my life. And that's the reason the Lord gave me all these jobs, so I could win the president. I didn't put down the big one, the one in Carthage, Missouri. I put him, I don't know how to get him in. Okay, I want to say this about the jobs that I had, the two top jobs that I had with the Fortune 500 companies that I think the Lord put me in those jobs, and one of them I mentioned his name, Tom Martin, and the other one I didn't, which was John Platt. And John Platt was the president and chairman of the board of Flexlator Corporation, which I worked for 18 years, and I wanted to get out to see him. I had witnessed to him one time in High Point when he was out here. It didn't come much, and so he was in his high 60s, and so I kept asking the Lord to get me back out to Carthage, Missouri, so I could talk to John again. And lo and behold, I got a buzz from my secretary, and she said they want you to call out to the company. They want you to come out there. They want to send you a new product and let you to show it to all your customers and let them see what it's like and see if think they'd like to use it. And I said, well, I don't like that. I said, how about me just flying out there and looking and see how the thing's made and see what it is myself. And they said, well, can you fly out here tomorrow? And I said, yes, I can fly out there tomorrow. And so I flew out there on a plane, Carthage, Missouri. And when I got out there, I said, I had to see the sales manager to handle this stuff. And I said, how in the world am I going to get to John Platt, president of the company? He's got these secretaries, chairman of the board. How am I going to get in? I get in to see him, but how am I going to get him alone? And this manager that took me out, when I picked me up, he said, I'm taking you out for supper tonight. But said, now this is the one I was trying to get a hold of. Said, John's going to take you out to supper tomorrow night. He says, you'll have to get a car. And I don't know how I got the car. You have to get a car, at least one, I reckon, and take him because he just had a cataract operation. And so I picked John up and we went out to eat, and we sat out in this nice restaurant he always liked to go to. And when I went out there on sales meetings, and we sit and talk. And I talked to him, I told him, John, you know, I talked to you in High Point about Christ, and you're 70 years old or whatever it is, and you never accepted Christ. And I said, and I just witnessed to him pull out. And I said, now when you get home tonight, if you think about, this wasn't a place, there's people everywhere. I said, when you get home tonight, you think about what I told you. And I said, now, if the Holy Spirit's dealing with you, you'll know it. And here's what you do, Romans 10:9, thou confess with thy mouth, Lord Jesus, believe in thine heart God's raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. I said, the gospel is the simplest thing in the world to be saved. So that's left. I bet he didn't eat 10 bites of his meal. He sat there, we just talked. And the next, he told me when we left, he said, I'm going with you tomorrow, and the other guy's gonna take me and you both out there to Joplin to get on a plane. And so we had a driver, and he drove us out there. And the last thing he said when he got on the plane was, "Gandhi, I've really been thinking about what you told me last night." I said, "Well, John, I'll be praying for you. You know what I told you to do." Well, when I got back to High Point on Monday, I went back to work, and I got a page, didn't have phones in, got a page on there from my secretary. She said, "John Platt wants you to call him." And I called him. He said, "Gandhi, I want you to know that I did just exactly what you told me to do." I said, "What did you do, John?" He said, "I asked Christ to come into my life." And that just tickled me to death. And anyhow, I know he got it because about 2 or 3 months later, we went on to a sales meeting in California, me and my wife, and all the whole company from all over the United States were there. And John had told me earlier in life that since he was 18 years old and hadn't missed a night, that he didn't take some liquor before he went to bed. It made him sleep better. And I knew he drank when he was around. Nice guy. But anyhow, he went to church all the time. And so when he walked in, him and his wife walked in the door, I saw them through the crowd, and they walked straight to the bar, and they got a drink, and they walked straight by everybody and walked to me and Mary, and he stuck that drink under my nose and said, "Coca-Cola." He said, "I hadn't had a drink since you know when." So I know he got it. Yeah. If a man can quit drinking like that. Cut it. Okay. Fillmore, I taught a study course in his church 7 weeks, and it's in the class he was in. And he'd been at church 80 all his life. And I said, hollered to him, I said, "Fillmore, you ever been," when I walked up, I said, "Fillmore." I told him to wait on me. He stopped and waited, turned around, waited on me. And I walked up there where he's at. I said, "Fillmore, you ever been saved?" He said, "No, I hadn't." I said, "Well, let me tell you how to be saved." And we were standing in the parking lot. And so I gave him the gospel, and I told him at the end, I said, "Now, Fillmore, just like I tell everybody, I don't have a Bible in my hand, I got it in my head." I said, "You know, you think about what I told you. You go home and get somewhere by yourself tonight, and you think about what I'm telling you. If the Holy Spirit's dealing with you, then this is what you do." So I told him that. He gave me his 2 phone numbers, and I gave him mine. I'm giving you this before we put it on. And I give him mine, and but I said, "You call me now if you do what I told you." Well, he never called me. So about 2 or 3 weeks later, I got word about it, and I tried to call him 2 or 3 times on both his phones, and he wouldn't answer, or didn't answer. So a buddy of his hung out down at the eating place every morning. So I went down there, rode down there to Archdale, and I asked Jimmy, I said, "You know, Fillmore, I've been trying to reach him, and I can't get a hold of him. Is he sick or something?" He said, "No, I was out eating with him last night." And so I just was sitting with somebody else, and I didn't think, I said, "Thank you." And directly, the same boy that I asked that to brought me his telephone. I said, "Who's that?" He said, "Fillmore, I got him online for you." And I said, "Fillmore, did you do what I told you? Did you get?" He said, "No, I didn't." I said, "Well, where can I come talk to you again?" He said, "Right now." I went over and led him to Christ. His home. That's a good story.
Yeah.
Really. 86 years old.
Wow.
He's dead now too. This has been he died in the last 6 months. But that's the story, but we don't have to put that in. There's one thing I cannot understand. It's how God could love a sinful man. In his own image created man he, no sin in their life should ever be. But when by transgression Adam fell, he condemned all men to eternal hell. But the Lord sent the second Adam, the Lord Jesus Christ, the Lamb slain to pay the price. Now through his blood all men are made whole, and a home in heaven is my goal. And when I shall hear that last trumpet sound, I shall rise with him from this ancient ground, go home and receive my robe and crown. And maybe then I'll be able to understand how God could love a sinful man. That's it. He came down from his heavenly throne, down to this earth to redeem his own. But there he hung on the cross. It seemed that Satan had won and God had lost. But the blood that flowed from the cross that day was to wash the sins of the world away. He had come to this world through a woman's womb and had left this world through a borrowed tomb. On the third day, an angel came and rolled the stone away. He had already risen from the dead, as in the scriptures it has said. 40 days he walked on earth and talked with men, and then entered back to heaven again. On the 10th day he sent his Holy Spirit down to this earth to stay in the hearts of men who would ask for forgiveness for their sins. Aren't you glad that the kingdom age was set aside so that you someday could become his bride? There at the marriage supper of the Lamb you'll be, the bride of Christ for eternity. There you shall see him face to face, him who has redeemed you by his grace. So be happy and rejoice, for Jesus has made you his church, his bride, his choice. That's it. I got them both. That's my 2 poems. Oh, well, I was going to Piedmont Bible College at night. At night school, I worked all day. That was when I had the company that I owned part of, Triad Manufacturing, and I was going. And I had dated. I was 32 years old, 31 then I reckon, or 32, and I had dated a lot of girls. And when you don't want to do, the first thing you do back in those days, and you ask them where they wanted to go on the first date, they'd say the movie, and I didn't go to the movie. I don't know why the Lord when I got saved, the Lord put that on me. I've not been to a movie since of any kind, and I don't know, it's mine. You know what I'm talking about? It's nobody else's, and so and you knew real quick whether or not. But I had 2 girls. One was named Kate Phillips. And she was, when I started dating her, I was about 20, and she was 14, but she's pretty. She's a homecoming queen and all the school. And I dated her for 3 years, and she went to college, and she met this boy from down in Florida, and come in at halftime, and boy, and she went, that we didn't go together anymore. She was with him. So the next girl did the same thing. I went with her 3 years. And almost married her, and this guy come in at half year, and man, he was good looking, I tell you that now. Mary even knew him. He come here today. I even bought her a stereo set for Christmas, and this all happened. And this met him, and she went with him down to Florida or Georgia. I may have been Georgia over Christmas, and that's it. Of course, my buddy went back and got my stereo back. But I've never seen her since. Anyhow, but I come back from college, and that night, and I pulled up beside one of my buddies there in the car, and I walked over to it. And I looked back in the back seat, and I saw these 2 girls sitting back there, and they had on shorts. Mary, one of them did. That was Mary, and I liked her looks kindly, and anyhow, I talked to her. We we dated every night but one for a year and got married.
Oh wow.
And so that's where I met her. Met her in a parking lot in a restaurant, Topper. And we've been married 50, what, Mary? 54? Huh?
53.
We got married in 65. That's maybe 55 years. And that's how we met. I think she was walking and I had 2 cars. I never have told her that. I fixed her up with a beauty. I had a 37 Ford Coach with a Corvette engine in it. It had beautiful wheels, had green and white leather seats in it, and big wheels and Corvette in. And I give it to her drive. And one of her friends, my friends knew her too, and 2 or 3 people told me she was running that thing pretty hard, and he told me, he said, I was going down to Baden, that's where we were living, and so I was going down there and I saw her coming up behind me, and so I decided I'd see how fast she'd go, and she said I got to 90 and she went by me like I stopped. Hey, I told her, I said, you've been running the wheels off that thing. And she said, no, I hadn't. And about a day or 2 later, she called me and she said, something happened to my car. Said the right rear wheel passed me. Back in those days, they had a straight axle on the rear. Yeah. If you pop the axle, the whole thing come out. Instead of just the wheel, the axle and all. Hey, I had some fast cars. I had the fastest. I outran. I got to tell you this story. I had some fast cars, and this one bunch of cars here guys had Junior Hughes had a Chevrolet, and there was a bunch of rough boys, and they were running that car for $500 all over everywhere betting, and they knew I had this fast Ford, and I had a '61. It had straight gear and overdrives, a 401, had 3.2s and all this stuff. Anyhow, headers, and they kept bothering me. Darryl Kersey, he killed this black girl and chopped her up and put her in a barrel. That's the kind of organization this was. And they trying to get me to run them. I said, I was not running you. And so the owner of the car kept coming down to Archdale little soda shop we used to go to before we went home at night. And he'd come down there. He come down 2 or 3 times with 4 or 5 cars. They knew I'd come in after Dayton and try to get me to run them. I told them I wasn't running them. So this night, this boy come by himself driving the car with his girlfriend with him, the owner of the car. And he called me over to the car. Hey, you come over here. He said, let's run tonight. I said, didn't you come back here at 1 o'clock and I'll run you. But if you bring another car with you, you just keep going. And I did not think my car, I had no idea my car would outrun that thing. We outrun him twice. And one of my buddy's best friends, he rode with me. I had proof. I couldn't believe it. We run off and left him both times. And it was next day. It was all, back in those days. That was all going on. Yeah. It was all over the country. 2 weeks later, I went to Denton up there, pulled in up there, talked to them about racing, and they asked me would I run a fast Chevrolet, and I said, well, yeah. He said, we'll go call him. I said, who you call? He said, Junior Hughes. I said, I just outrun him 2 weeks ago. Oh, he said, you the one. But anyhow, I'll tell y'all that stuff. But I had some fast cars. You ain't got that on there, have you?
So who was riding with you that night?
Boy, his name was Gaylord Rush.
That guy. He explains it all.
I don't know why I let him ride with me. I never would let anybody ride with me. But he jumped in my car and said, I'm going with you. He had a Ford too. We outrun him. We left him, I reckon we left him 20 car lengths on the takeoff. And I had mine was straight gear and overdrive. And you had to know that overdrive. An overdrive, you had to take your foot off the gas, let it go in. You don't want me to change the gears? You didn't have to do that. Just flip the switch and keep your foot on the gas. And I don't know what his problem was, but we were just gonna run down. I told him we'd just run down to this place and that'd be it. But he was so far back, I thought his car broke down, really. I thought something wrong with it. He pulled up and he said, I got a bad start. Said, let's start at 60. Hey, we started at 60 and I rode off and left it worse. Hey, never had to race again. Nobody mess with you.
That's right.
Nobody.
Story.
Gonna have what?
Poots all in the story.
Well, I can't remember.
Every time you slide like that, you're okay. Just
no,
don't.
I'm getting this other seat. I can't help it.
No. Don't mess up the thing.
Well, I'll put something on it.
No. we got the camera set up for that, Cherry.
Don't be messing.
You're fine. You're fine.
I can't stay. Can I put something under me?
No, you're fine. You're fine.
We like it.
I think everybody like that better than anything. They think I'm full of it.
Well, we know that.